And so you go there. And then when you come out, you feel awful. And then you start to convince yourself, well, this is really who I am.
Mm.
And so, or maybe you go, okay, well, let me just try again. You might stay there for a while where you go, this is who I am. But then maybe you convince yourself, well, okay, no, I'm not. So let me try again. And that shame keeps you just going, rotating over and over again.
Every bit of you is sacred by design. Okay, Kyle and I are just going to jump in because the topic that we are covering today, a lot of women don't want to face or don't even acknowledge because they think this is a guy's thing. Women struggle with unwanted sexual behavior.
Yes.
Period. Yes, they do. That being said, how do you recover from a fall? So I think we should almost start with that first part. Women struggle with unwanted sexual behavior.
Absolutely. This is a human problem. It's not just a man's problem. It's a human problem. And so it's important to really acknowledge that as a woman, like you're going to be tempted just like any other human being is tempted.
Yeah.
Right? So, try to sort of dispel the whole mystique around the fact that, oh, why am I a woman dealing with this?
That's awesome.
Right.
Yes. So if you are a woman and you're listening and you've been dealing with an unwanted sexual behavior that can look like what?
It could be pornography addiction.
Okay.
It could be hookups. Maybe you're married and you're having an extramarital affair. Maybe you have found yourself steeped in erotic literature. Those are all the different ways that we would define unwanted sexual behavior.
So you're not alone.
Right.
You're not alone. So that's step one, is acknowledging that this is a thing, that we do have desire, we do have temptation as women, and so we do also suffer with unwanted sexual behaviors.
Right. And so maybe you've been around folks who say, well, women aren't really visual. It's men that are really visual. So let's kind of stomp that lie out first, right?
Let's go there. Yeah.
And so let's talk about Eve. All right. Genesis 3 says, when she saw the tree, she saw that it was good for food, a delight to the eyes, and desirable to make one wise. What you see right there is lust. So here she was visually drawn in her temptation. So we've got to acknowledge that, God has designed us, right, to admire beauty, but sometimes we want to consume the beauty.
And that's not just true for men. That's true for us as well.
That's true for us because we are God's creation, and He created all of us to experience and delight in beauty, right? So you got Eve. Think about Potiphar's wife. And, she was on the strong side with that, right? Like she ripped Joseph's clothes and things. And she really badgered him into trying to draw him into a sexual relationship. So again, like we forget about that all of that is a human expression. It's not just a man's expression.
I think that just calling it out as just a fact is a wonderful way to take off at least one layer of shame.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's what we're going to keep doing. Because if you are struggling with an unwanted sexual behavior, like you're addicted to porn. Okay, so now what do you do?
Yeah.
Do you just keep suffering alone? No.
Right. And here's the thing. Maybe you are a person who you've had this level of sobriety going.
Okay.
Right? Maybe you even been kind of ticking off the day. Oh, I've made it 3 months. I made it 6 months. I made it 1 year. And then all of a sudden you tank for whatever reason. I think the first thing to remember is there is some intentionality you have to have about releasing the shame of that. Because what happens is when you keep yourself covered with shame, you stay in the cycle, right? So, it's like you go along fine maybe there is a traumatic event. And when I say traumatic, it doesn't have to be, somebody died or, it's got to be this horrific thing. It could be something that just upset you. And so you work to try to do things to make yourself feel better, but you go to your old standby, right? You call that person that you hook up with,
Right.
or you pick up that book that kind of lets you escape into this fantasy world. And so you go there. And then when you come out, you feel awful. And then you start to convince yourself, well, this is really who I am. And so, or maybe you go, okay, well, let me just try again. You might stay there for a while where you go, this is who I am. But then maybe you convince yourself, well, okay, no, I'm not. So let me try again. And that shame keeps you just going, rotating over and over again. And it's so hard to get out. And so I think one of the things to do is to first of all, be willing to acknowledge that, okay, this is what happened. I had a rough day at work, or, maybe you had a breakup and you go, gosh, like this hurt me more than I thought. Because remember, those needs that you have are legitimate.
Okay, that's say that again.
The need that you have is legitimate. Your need to be soothed is legitimate. You have a legitimate need to have someone come alongside you and say, gosh, I'm really sorry you're struggling with this. And this is hard. And to be willing to say that, like, you don't have to be this strong, the song by Whitney Houston, I'm Every Woman, right? You don't have to be that, because that's a bunch of junk.
Right.
And you have to realize, okay, this is an issue for me. And it's hard. And to be able to say that first and foremost to the Lord, because he knows it's hard.
Yeah.
He knows you cannot do it by yourself. And so I think a way to relieve the first layer of shame, because shame can come in layers. So I think the first layer is to acknowledge that this is hard.
Okay.
And that doesn't make you less of a Christian.
Yeah.
Because it's hard.
Still hard.
It is. It's hard. And I think then where you can go is to start confessing to the Lord, like, what are you longing for? And maybe you have to say out loud, like, Lord, my heart is hurting. And I feel like the only thing that's going to make me feel better is if I hook up, or if I look at some porn, if I read this novel, if, I step out on my spouse. Like, be willing to say that to God.
Because the legitimate need needs to be met.
It needs to be addressed.
So
Absolutely.
how can we, like, what are the questions, or what are the ways that we can go a little bit deeper if we're willing to bring it to the Lord and say, all right, I don't want to do the shame game anymore. I messed up again, or whatever it is. But now what? I just want to feel close to somebody.
Yeah.
Okay. So then what's next?
So I think the closeness first starts with the Lord, and confessing all of those things, saying what you really, really feel, because he's the one who can do something about it, right? Then secondly, who is a person that you trust, that you can say, gosh, you know what? Man, I was doing well for 3 months, and I'm finding myself right back in the same spot again. What can I do? Or, I need to tell this to you. Finding somebody that you trust, that you can share with. The other thing is, take some inventory.
Okay.
What's happening in your life? What even happened in the last 24 hours? Or maybe you have to look at the last 7 days. But what's happening inside? Because those can be clues that you realize, oh man, I didn't realize that if I have a stressful day, this is where I want to go. Or if I think something bad is going to happen, this is how I respond. Because this is a response to something.
Right.
You're not just doing this because it's what you do. It's your heart is telling you something.
Yeah.
So be curious about that and just kind of look over the last at least 24 hours. And if you have to look further, go look at the past week, see what that was like.
You know, we talk a lot about story here and in what we do with spiritual coaching, and people get kind of like wigged out or put off by the idea of story because I don't have a story or I don't know what you're talking about. But just that inventory that you're talking about, the 24 hours or the 7 days, that can be a story. So what does the story of the past 24 hours look like? What did it begin like? What was the peak of it, or what was the valley? And to be able to see, like you're saying, okay, there was a need and it came from something. So to look at that story carefully and also be very aware that Satan is
He's real.
He is real. And he would just love to take the pen from your hand and start putting shame all over that story. So to usher him out and just really be aware between you and God, all right, here's the story from the past 24 hours. Go through it with me.
Yes, yes. And if you have to even do it as I woke up and this is how I was feeling when I woke up. Maybe you had even a foreboding feeling that the day wasn't going to be good. Like that's a clue. And maybe you can chart that. And maybe you can think about other days that have been like that. And you realize how it ended. And those are places that God can really meet you. And it's also places where a good, trusted Christian friend can reflect Jesus to you. Because, you know, we're on this earth to reflect him to one another. So you get a chance to experience Jesus with skin on.
You know the story of when resurrected Jesus is calling out to the disciples and they're out on the water and Peter had just denied Jesus 3 times and he's out there fishing and Jesus calls him and John, like you're saying, a good friend was like, oh my gosh, there's the Lord, because Peter couldn't even recognize him. So Jesus goes, or Peter gets in the water and runs out to him, and it's almost like Jesus recreates even sensory, like the charcoal fire.
Yes.
So to me, that attention to detail from Jesus is so such an example of his heart for us that he wants to pull in the examples or the details from the day that we're trying to pull together. He wants to pull those in and be like, okay, I smelled that too. I know what it's like to wake up like that too. And then he offers those 3 questions. But Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? For each of the 3 denials. And that's the kind of Jesus that we're inviting into this.
Yeah. And for some people, like if that's hard, right? I think if you're willing to kind of use your imagination some with this, right? So let's think about the woman who was caught in adultery.
Okay.
All right. So if you can, as a first step, close your eyes and imagine what it might have been like to be in that scene, right? Maybe you are a person who is looking on, you're an onlooker, and you imagine what it's like to see this woman come out of just having committed adultery and the law saying that they can stone her, and Jesus flipping the law on its head and talking to those Pharisees and saying, wait a minute, like if you haven't sinned, okay, you can throw a stone. And then Jesus looking down and going, woman, where are your accusers? Right? So now if you can take that and then go, okay, I just looked at porn. Here I am walking out of the place where I've looked at porn and Jesus is there. Can you take a moment and as you close your eyes and imagine that Jesus is standing there waiting for you as you come out? And he's not there to condemn you. He's not there to shame you, but he's there to go, who's around here to accuse you? And he just wants to draw you into that. And so if you have the ability to just close your eyes and imagine that and do that as a regular practice, I think you will find so much healing in that. And the shame, and then it's harder for shame just to jump on top of you.
Yeah. And I'm crying already just thinking about whoever she is that's listening to consider that coming out, just lifting your head from whatever it is
Mm-hmm.
that you fell into
Yeah.
and to experience meeting Jesus there. Just,
It's like, how can you walk away from that feeling shame
yeah.
or condemnation when you have a God who loves you so much
Mhm.
that he wants to see transformation? Like, he's not going to look at you and go like, well, you're too far gone.
Yeah.
He's not doing that.
Right.
He's going, no, like, let me into this so I can bring transformation to you.
Mm.
Because you don't have to do all the work either. If you are willing to submit yourself,
Yeah.
he's going to work through you.
Mhm.
And I think the last thing, and people don't think about this, but why not have an emergency preparedness plan,
Okay.
right?
Talk more about that.
So, how are you preparing yourself for when you have a fall? Because here's the thing. Most of us will have a reaction where we go, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I did this again. This is awful. How am I going to ever stop this, right? That's usually the narrative.
Yeah.
You should be able to have some things that you go to when you've had a fall. So maybe there's some of the things that we've talked about already. Maybe
Okay.
it's engaging with Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
engaging with another person. Maybe there are things that you need to do ahead of time. If you're waking up and you put your feet on the floor
Mm.
and you're going, man, I'm not feeling today.
Mm.
So maybe there's some things you need to do. Maybe there's something you need to do just to give yourself a shot of joy.
Mm.
Maybe there's a way that you need to connect to the Lord as soon as you hit your feet on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
What are those things that you can kind of keep in a toolbox?
Mm.
Maybe you need to have a scripture that you go to where it's posted up, where you can go and see. Maybe you have to, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Maybe whatever declaration you need to make. What are you going to have on hand instead of listening to your own voice, shaming you? Pick a different voice to listen to. Maybe you need to do it through worship music. So what are those things that you can kind of have as, okay, here are the ways I'm going to recover. I have this set of tools here that's available for me, that I don't have to listen to my own voice. I don't have to keep myself in this spiral, which ultimately can send me right back to what I was doing before.
Yeah.
How can I have some things that are really important to me, that maybe there is an object? So maybe you get, I don't know, maybe it's a beautiful rock, or maybe it's a beautiful flower or something that you use as a reminder of who you are, who you belong to, and that he's giving you all that you need to walk out of this, so that it's not a recurring thing just over and over and over again. And you have to be patient with yourself, because throw away the numbers and counting,
Okay.
right? Because it's easy to say, oh, I made it 6 months, I made
Yeah.
it. And then you start to put your faith in the numbers and not in the Lord. You can hold that thing up really high and walk around.
Yeah.
I made it 6 months. Right? You can do that.
Yes.
And guess what? Like, God doesn't care.
That's right.
He really doesn't.
Yes.
And you know what? Celebrate. But when you have a victory, celebrate it.
Yeah.
Right? If you make it one day and you go, gosh, like I had a really awful day, and I went to my toolbox and I used the stuff in my toolbox as opposed to looking at porn or going and hooking up with someone. Celebrate. Go have a piece of cake, some ice cream, go party, do stuff. Like, celebrate that. Because what you're also doing is you're teaching yourself and receiving a different feeling about victory.
Oh, that's good.
Right? And then your brain wants some more of that. Your brain is going to go, oh, that was good. I love that. Like, we can get ice cream if we don't do this. This is awesome. Right? So, celebrate those things. Even if you have to call some friends and go, hey, you know what?
Yeah.
You guys, like, I was able to really turn down temptation today. You know, I had a fall 3 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and when temptation came up today, I was able to turn away from it and praise God, celebrate.
That is the best note to end on, isn't it?
Yeah, celebration, right?
Because, you know, the Lord is too. Either way, that you're turning your face towards Him or that you're saying no and looking towards more of who you are, more of who He's called you to be. And I love this. I love the emergency toolkit. I love the celebration. And I love the honesty of this. Thank you, Kyle.
Glad to share. Absolutely glad to share.